Hello, Mike. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Jack. Good to talk. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. I'm hoping to share something interesting, but as usual, I'm going to improv, unless you have a topic for this week that you want to tackle.
Well, I'm kind of focusing on some very technical things related to generative AI, and I guess kind of generally speaking, I'm kind of discovering more and more that the hype, right, about the latest and greatest GPT-5s, and models from Anthropic and models from Google is kind of like a little bit misplaced because the way probably we should be using AI is maybe rely on those great models, and they are great. There's no question about it. But we should kind of use them more like kernels or engines for processing, where the focus should be on what context we are providing to those AIs, rather than maybe kind of gravitate towards the usage that is similar to how we use Google search engine, right? We expect to type, one or two words, perhaps even misspell them, right? And then the AI, the search engine, which is kind of also an AI kind of algorithm, is supposed to deliver to us, like in the first, two or three links, exactly what we were thinking about, right?
Mhm.
So once we kind of realize that the AIs are already great in their language processing capabilities, then if we kind of think about, hey, maybe the context should be enriched, right? Maybe we should attach more to the discussion, right? Or enrich the history of the discussion, or maybe even use the model adversarially, so that the model is actually asking itself, like, hey, no, maybe let's double check something, right? Maybe let's enrich this. Maybe something feels like it's missing from the initial discussion. If we kind of steer the interaction with the AI towards those kind of things, then really magic happens way beyond kind of like the canned, chat GPT-5, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
latest and greatest. So that's kind of what I'm discovering more and more when I'm working on my use cases.
I mean, you teed it up great as always because the last article I wrote tends to be the kind of article you hate that I write, but it was all about the hype, right? That we invent these words and we invent these things like supercomputers. So I actually go into why supercomputers have nothing to do with being super. There's quantum computing, which has nothing to do with being more than super, right? Like we kind of, and then GPT, like you said, five. Well, it's like six is going to be even better. And I'm like, yeah, iPhone 15 is so much better than 10, but it isn't. You see what I mean? There are natural limits to everything. That's all, right? Everything has, in fact, you start to hit limits, which for us might be a great topic because I think maybe our mental model might have hit its limit. Not you and me. We're pros in this game, right? I think we saw right off the bat, like this thing is much weirder than you think. At least that's what I thought, right? Like it isn't this all-purpose AGI thing because even then, okay, great. And I can give you a couple examples, but okay, but then what do you do with that, right? What does that replace? How does that mechanic, just like, we used to walk to the grocery store, but then we got a horse and buggy, you know what I mean? Like, what did it change about going to the grocery store other than make it quicker and maybe we could haul more food?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the mode of kind of our life, right, like is changing, and sitting at our desks the whole day and doing something super sophisticated with AI may not be actually progress, right? May not define
Right,
progress at all.
sure.
Perhaps we should
Except to
be
our workout routines. That seems to be what
yeah,
everyone looks for. And I hope they have better workout routines and diets, honestly. 100% worthwhile health things, right? I can't see a doctor every day. So at least get some info. Sorry, keep going.
yeah, and then maybe it's kind of this kind of workout analogy great. There's still a lot of discussion whether workouts from you know, no, we've been talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Whether workouts that he was kind of inventing when he was young and really kind of opening the door to weightlifting as a yes, bodybuilding, not exactly healthy, occupation, but weightlifting in general, right? It's very good for our health, and that is has been proven, right? And those basic exercises that they were doing, at that time, perhaps are in no way inferior to what is kind of being kind of another hype, right? The latest and greatest machines, maybe kind of doing certain protocols that may or may not work. And whereas, those standard, pushing and pulling exercises, maybe a little squatting, maybe a little deadlifting, that were around for 50, 60 years and maybe longer, is kind of actually the way to go. So, or in no way inferior. Right. So the same can be applied to the intellectual or cognitive tasks that we are kind of trying to kind of complete every day. And maybe I'm kind of you and I, we are coming from maybe a different time where kind of taking notes, for example, at school, right, was something that was totally normal, and it kind of stayed with me, right? And now people are discovering, hey, taking notes is actually helping you kind of finding solutions better, kind of like cognitive processes are improved because you're kind of remembering better if you write something down, not because necessarily you're going to look at it 5 minutes later, but because the acting process of writing down is kind of like better. So yeah, so I don't know if there is if there is kind of better or worse, in the environment that we live in, but there is certainly different modes that perhaps are still worth kind of utilizing in our lives, right?
I mean, oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, in teaching, I think this always comes up, right? Because I have certain things that I wish that people would, or I plan for them to spend some time with and really try to puzzle through. And I'm actually coming up with a new kind of curriculum that stages everything for them because I've noticed that time management seems to be really poor. And I'm kind of like saying like, hey, this is going to take a few hours and then think about it and then come to this thing the next day and just trying to get into a more human approach. Because to your point, we got kind of stuck on Google, but then at one point or another, and I use this analogy in the article that you wouldn't like about, at some point they wrote down the standard normal deviation tables, right? And once you know that they're there, you don't have to compute them, right? You might not even know how they were derived because they just become like logarithms. That was the biggest breakthrough of all time, was to have a logarithmic table, right? Because that kind of math was really time consuming and took a ton of skill. And then you made it easier, right? And I always say that that's when, okay, unfortunately, that takes away that work for a lot of people, right? Because that's sort of this low level work, which, by the way, used to be somebody's job, at some point,
Exactly.
and I see this today. I see it actually in one of the subtopics today was like, so and so big company lays off X amount of people. And one of the things I really abhor about AI is the idea that it helps you get more done quicker. Sorry, you see what I mean? Like, it's supposed to be another quote unquote productivity tool. And as we learned, like even now, I think there's a computer on every desktop, but it doesn't mean that everyone who has a computer knows how to use a computer. Does that make sense? Right? Like, they're weird machines that do all sorts of stuff. Your computer, my computer. Part of maybe the humor of my thing was, you remember processing speed and all that stuff. Like, we used to be so into this stuff. Like, oh, if we could only eke a couple more faster cycles, then we would do this amazing thing or whatever. You see what I mean? Like, we were so in the thick of it, and now it seems, oh, ho hum, right? They're faster than, like I said, this phone versus the one, 10 years from now, it's not going to be substantially different. right? I mean, it will probably do the same thing because my eyes aren't going to get better. And you can only fit so many buttons on. You see what I mean? They're just finite, right? You hit an optimization curve, and that happens all the time. And maybe that's what I'm asking is, we certainly have an optimized businesses. Not end of story. Not happening anytime soon, right? Businesses are, once you get more than 10 people, are way too complex to throw AI and say, okay, Bill and Jim are fired. It's almost right. I mean, am I crazy? Do you think anyone's doing that? I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess I am maybe just kind of like so there's a population of people and there's population of jobs and distributions, right? So I am in the distribution where as an AI architect, where I have a lot of kind of freedom in terms of the decision, like how do I approach a use case, for example, right? Sometimes I define the use case, right? So in a way, my interaction with AI is very beneficial because it's immersive for me. So I am able to. I'm seeing that I'm spending a lot more time with the AI than, let's say, comparing to maybe like a programming tool, right? I am immersed in this natural language conversation about the code that
Right.
I'm writing, as opposed to a cognitive load on writing the code without an AI is totally different. I wouldn't be able to do it all day, but I can have a conversation all day with the AI, right?
Sure.
So I am producing different outputs. I'm probably producing better outputs, I hope, right? But I'm definitely doing different things. So my output, the way how I'm solving the problem, and with the AI enables me to do a lot more breadth because I have easier access to a lot of different knowledge domains that otherwise I would have to open the book like the logarithmic table. I would have to look up the logarithmic value, right? And it would take me a few minutes to actually
Yeah.
maybe find something, right? But here, it takes me only seconds to generate a tremendous breadth of the solution. So in a way, I'm maybe somewhat unusual user of the AI, right? That there might be a lot different domains where that kind of like mode of communication and that immersion may not be happening, right? So, but yeah, in a way, so coming back to that logarithmic table approach, right? So what happened, after that was the calculator shows up, right? And the calculator will have the logarithms in it,
Hmm.
right? And then similar kind of revolution has happened. It's just that now what the AI allows us to do is that the calculator was a very narrow domain, right? It was mathematical calculation. Now with the AI, we can kind of like extend the domain of automation into many different things, and that is profound, right? That is probably more.
Yeah. Well, and especially remember, if you Googled something, you'd still have to assess a bit of which is relevant, go to that page or thing, then da 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 da. You see what I mean? Like it was actually kind of more of a library model
Yeah.
than GPT is, which is unfortunately, I don't think it's an answer model because that might be where we could talk a little bit more, right? Like it's not bad be, for a lot of reasons because of architecture. I think it could be much worse, and perhaps you'll be amused since you like my reference to the logarithms.
Mm.
I was like asking GPT, and I think I might write an article on this. Maybe you can give me your thoughts. Is I was like, well, if you were to really look at, let's say, the English language, we'll just pretend that that's important. A lot of plenty of languages out there, code language, right? You would see a lot of the and the. Sorry, I said the twice. Anyway, you would see these
Yeah.
words a lot. So predominance of them is outrageous, right? But they are incredibly insignificant, right? So if you were just doing basic pattern matching, right? That you couldn't use your logarithmic tables. And of course, we can get into then, oh, well, that's why neural nets work, is they don't attach frequency does not equal value. Anyway, you see what, and as I said, we went on and on about this because it is kind of a misnomer that, people think it's Google. Google used PageRank. PageRank is not complicated. I mean, it's proprietary, but it isn't complicated. It's an algorithm like sorting through your YouTube results, right? You and I can both say, oh yeah, nothing really complicated about this. In fact, I can retrain it. But because generative AI especially doesn't operate on that model, it's a different architecture. I think that's why people try to impose the old architecture onto the new tool. And that's also why I think improvement has to come from us, right? Like us figuring it out, because I also read, and you'll like this too, somebody who's like a coder and they're talking about how, oh, it saves me so much time using it to make code. He's like, yeah, except now I have the really hard job, which is to see whether this code is any good, right? Like now the job becomes quite a bit more challenging. Where it used to be that if I wrote it myself, I mean, I would know why it broke because I see what I mean. Like I used the wrong pointer. You know what I mean? Like you would have all the time that humans need to understand something, which I think is time consuming, right? And even though you get better at things, listen, I just cooked this thing last night. It should have worked and I screwed it up. You see what I mean? Like we're always making mistakes, but those are the ways we learn, just like you were saying, putting words on a page. You didn't remember anything. You didn't memorize this stuff, right? You just distilled it, because I'd say 10 things, 100 things like I always do, and you remember 2 of them.
No, usually 3.
You're a really smart guy, though. So this is why we talk, because I'm always, the human part is the hard part, right? The quality or the value is the hard part. And even though now we have a value-seeking algorithm, or sorry, a value-seeking architecture, that's just a new thing to really ponder, right? 2 years into this, and it's still, I think, as I said, I don't look forward to a new model. I don't really care, because it's all fine, except now the hard part still remains.
Yeah, and I think we always wrestle with the definition of what the value actually is, right? I mean, can somebody define value, right? You mentioned frequency, right? So frequency is a value, right? So frequency is a tremendously useful classification value for your tasks, right? Like if you have a collection of documents and you would like to maybe find relevance, right? Then the word frequency is golden, right? There's nothing better, especially if you are using something like a natural language processing. We have this TF-IDF, term frequency, inverted document frequency, which is kind of a very clever kind of statistical way to actually find a way to kind of like find a way to reweight the terms, the words that are in the documents, right? And it turns out that if you have a word that is very frequent in a subset of a document, so let's say you have a very frequent word in 1 or 2 documents out of maybe hundreds that you have in the hard drive, that is a fantastic. There is nothing better, even with generative AI. There's nothing better to actually classify the document, into, let's say, relevant or not relevant, right? But is that the value, right? Obviously, it's probably not, because
Right.
I mean, we may even have internal kind of like a feeling about what is valuable, right? And like maybe the Einstein's general relativity paper was extremely important, but it was extremely important maybe to a subset of the population, and still they probably wouldn't be able to define that it was important, because they wouldn't actually understand what is in it. It was maybe something totally new, right? So the information value in something totally new may be tremendous, but we still don't realize it, right? So the value assessment is extremely hard, but we can get closer with AI right now, because
Yeah.
the AI,
I agree.
yeah,
It's quite, yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary, right? Because you might not have seen today that 600 million emails or something were just dumped about Epstein. And the New York Times, of course, like everyone, is scrambling to say something about it. And of course, you can't just keyword this crap because that doesn't work, even though he's got a very recognizable name, right? Like, so you can't just do this sort of SQL search like we used to hate, because SQL search is like, that's why you have PageRank. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And then I don't know what they found, but what they did find is to say we had to use AI experts. And they had to kind of apologetically say that. And I was like, don't be apologetic. I would trust an AI over 100 workers working 100 hours a day to try to, you see what I mean? Because their biases are just as whatever, you know. So sorry, I think I'm supporting your argument, Jack, but I was excited for a moment.
Totally right. So there was, so there is probably some golden nuggets maybe hidden in document collections. I mean, I'm not talking about Epstein, and there was also, like a dump, a while ago about, the Panama Papers, so-called,
Sure.
like the governments, and the people.
Well, and to throw one more in, there's a movie called The Conversation, which the whole thing is about overhearing something, and the interpretation of one word was wrong, right? So, and that word is a common word. So even that is kind of the metaphor here, right? Like, it's really tough to build contextual relevance, but I do trust that AI is pretty good at it, more so than me personally.
Yeah, but to kind of maybe finish this about quality, right? One of the kind of like I started talking about giving AIs context, and like GPT-5 is really kind of like could be just a kernel or a processing kind of tool, right? You can also ask explicitly the AI to create like a validation rubric, where it's you can give it some hints, like what's important to you. Right. Therefore, you maybe indicate the value, and then the AI will expand on it, and maybe kind of it's going to apply that rubric to itself while generating answers to your maybe kind of like nebulous or maybe far from being complete, like questions about things that you are researching. Right. So there's things like that, and there is that field, like 20 years ago was called data mining. Like, hey, we don't know what's in there, but we would like to kind of figure out something.
Sorry, I'm having flashbacks now. Okay, yeah.
But now the conversation, is kind of changing things, because we can apply, we can give the AI some qualitative and quantitative kind of indication what value might be, even if we don't have a perfect definition for it ourselves.
Well, and that leads me into the topic I'm trying to teach, actually, which is based. I don't know if you've ever heard of a book called Super Forecasting. I might have mentioned it a couple times, but
yeah, sounds familiar.
Okay, so it was just another project where it was about telling the future, and I think because a lot of our data mining and stuff might not be about understanding the present. Understanding the president's too hard, but understanding the present, right, or understanding the past is pretty valuable, right? And that's that's anthropology, archaeology, right? You're trying to gather data to form a model, and that helps you understand the present, perhaps, because in this case, weather modeling and crop rotations, and I'm assuming a ton of things to do with almost everything to do with engineering, right, is based a little bit more on modeling things properly in current states. But future modeling is kind of where our heads are at most of the time, right? Which is the why get up in the morning problem. Like, well, because if I don't do this, this, and this, my future might be I'd get hungry and cold and and whatever. You know what I mean? We're modeling for this idea, but our data is often very poor about how we should use our time. Sorry, students of mine, use your time more wisely. So I'm actually using AI to model their time, because hell, I can come up with this stuff, but I can't do the work. right? Like if you show it to me, I might be able to say, oh, something good is here. This is the creative director in me, right? Like
Mm.
this is getting somewhere, this isn't, and I can continually reiterate pretty much easily, and that's fun for me. How's that, right? Whereas doing the work, getting no feedback, because I can't really judge my own work very well, right? Um, uh, well, okay, let me stop because I was kind of also going to say, like, I write a piece, and then I leave it, and then I come back to it and I reread it, and then I edit it, I write it again, and then I come back again and I read. So I usually need five-ish times to be confident,
Mm.
right? And now, even with help from AI, because I have it read it too, I don't just take its suggestions because I'm like, I haven't trained you well enough to be that good, but you're good enough if I ramble.
Mm.
So, which is what you have to deal with, right? Like, if you've made your point, move on is hard sometimes, right? Because you always, it's fun. I like to write. I like, rambling. But to get a point across, to be convincing, and to say something to somebody, hey, you want future X, do Y, is often where a lot of real skilled people's talents and a lot of our higher education, especially, is pointed at, right? You don't have a CPA that just, you don't, even data mining, I'm laughing because a lot of those people had no training in how to use the data that they mined. You know what I mean? They were
Mm.
kind of like, here, coal down there, I'll bring it up here. Just tell me, how much coal you need. Sorry, data miners. But do you see what I mean? It was more about hauling, just like Arnold figured out ways to make himself look good. But if your job was on a dock, lifting crates and moving them over into, you see what I mean? That's why people built muscles, because they had to do really dull, repetitive work. And when you do it, your muscles respond, right? And those people might have been good looking, great, but that wasn't the purpose. You see what I mean? The purpose was to lift stuff so that you would be able to eat and have a place to stay.
Mm.
And a lot of these, once you take away those jobs, right? We want all the benefit. I think this might be a good metaphor, right? We want the shiny muscles or the smart brains, but we don't need them anymore. We need new skills or new kinds of activities. I don't think that's badly stated, even though it was rambling. What do you think?
Well, I think that one of the analogies here maybe I can give you was the world of chess, right? Um, it's throughout history, like hundreds of years, probably the game that existed was always kind of like indicator of high intelligence, high cognitive effort, right? And then, one day there was the chess playing program that was created, and it was pretty good, right? Like out of the bat. And then
Mm-hmm.
there was the IBM, infamous match between Anatoly Kasparov, right, and the IBM system. And that was kind of a very kind of sad story because IBM unnecessarily kind of applied psychological pressure on the human player, and they kind
Mm.
of made him a little bit kind of like very very suspicious, because essentially the during that very famous match, and by the way, Kasparov was really kind of like unquestionably one of the very strongest players that existed in history, right? So he was at the top, top one, top two, right, for sure. And they applied unnecessarily pressure on him, right? Like they wouldn't kind of let his team to kind of look at, where the computer is, because so he started a suspicion that maybe there is like a team of experts
Mm-hmm.
working with a very strong chess playing software, and
Mm-hmm.
that combination is lethal. Everybody knows about it. Like if there is like a very good player that is able to work with a very good computer playing chess, that combination outperforms any single human player, right? So initially, first few matches, the computer plays very mediocre kind of like very, like high performance, but
Competent.
really
Yeah. Yeah.
competent, level of chess, but nothing inhuman, right? And then there is game number three, and then suddenly the AI makes a move that Kasparov considered to be like a stellar level chess, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
and he got suspicious that, well, I mean, so it was inconsistent, right? Like something happened, right? And he asked for access, right, to, hey, how are you actually running the show? And IBM wouldn't give it to him. And there is really
Mm.
no reason for the IBM to kind of hide anything. I mean, unless there was a reason, right? So then he kind of got paranoid and he lost the whole match.
But you bring up that really interesting thing is that he would know that. I think that's what people don't recognize, that he would recognize it is superhuman, right? Because to the computer, it probably didn't. I'm saying it didn't cheat, but you see what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be like, here's a really good move, right? Because there's no ego, there's no, it's just a computer. It doesn't care, right? You know,
Yeah,
But do you
yeah,
see what
but
I mean? I
yeah.
kind of giving him credit, even though that threw him off. But that ability to see bad code, to see
Mm.
in complicated systems that, hey, this isn't a really good architecture, which is what I was dealing with this thing, right? These architectures are on quantum computing. I mean, give me a break. This is like the most ridiculous architecture
Mm.
you can kind of imagine, and good for them. Something to
Yeah.
do. Good for you. Go full. Who cares, right? But it isn't outrageous, except for its audacity. That's I think where you're getting is that people look that he lost, and that's a shame. I don't think that should be the lesson. Sorry, but I love the story, by the way.
Yeah, so I think that was not a just outcome, right? So he was, the human player was clearly diminished by the circumstances of the match, right? But what happened after that was, I think that the game of chess was diminished by that loss, right? Because now people realize that, oh, okay, so there's those chess playing engines, they will beat anybody, right? So should we really play
Hmm.
chess? Because
Hmm.
it's really kind of like the human brain is really not going to be able to compete with your PC computer running, Fritz. Fritz is one of the game engines, right?
Yeah.
So I feel the same way, right? Like the AI beat the human player, and now it kind of diminished my interest in chess a little bit. If the opposite was true, like if there was like a human player that can consistently beat very, very good AI in chess, then I would be maybe more aspiring towards playing chess myself, because I would feel like, hey, okay, so we have an edge, right? Like, okay, I obviously I wouldn't be able to do that myself, because I'm not a good chess player, but I would watch those championship matches, because I would know that it would be something more significant, right? So I think maybe AI is kind of doing the same today to the intellectual work, right? To the whatever, white collar or whatever, or maybe even to research work, where maybe slowly it will encroach into that domain where, okay, people will think, okay, maybe I shouldn't get into that master's program, and
Hmm.
kind of get specialized in something, because I mean there's this AI, it's going to be at the PhD level at least, so maybe I should kind of maybe kind of like give up that. So I think there is a danger, right, in here, where AI is kind of maybe not, to your point, right, that AI is kind of causing a lot of harm, in the jobs area, and then and actually as humans aspiring to actually do, amazing things, because, all right, well, okay, we're always going to be second, distant second.
Well, I do take a little, and I don't disagree at all. I'm just sort of, maybe I take a different, it's a half glass full thing, which is I just don't think we recognize how extremely extraordinary we are, right? And we don't value it often, right? We value some sort of artificial thing like win-loss is very artificial, right? If you had a 15-minute football game and somebody won, great. If you had a 6-hour football game and somebody won, well, it's quite a bit different, right? Because humans aren't infinitely scalable. You see what I mean? And also that 15 minutes would have a whole different tone to it. So see what I mean? Games are very funny that way, right? Because someone like Kasparov, I'm always surprised whenever I play chess that someone who knows how to play chess instantly beats me because they know that move that instantly beats me. And I haven't learned to recognize that move that instantly beats me. And once I learn it, I'd learn the counter move and see you'd go down a sort of a language in a way, right? Like, and that I think is so wonderful. All of this is like kind of amazing. And I'll just spill the part of the thing you wouldn't also like about this is that I get rid of AGI, which isn't a thing and can't kill us all, right? And of course, the sentient robot things that will have AI in them that will kill us all. It's the fears, right, that things are linear. Things always are going to go up. And I just stated, and I'll give you the story, which is just because of Moore's law, many people out there think that that's the truth. Computers are doubling in power all the time, and they're always going to become more powerful infinitely. And the truth, of course, is they never did that. And actually, Moore's law ended about 10 years ago, but nobody mentions it, right? They only tout faster, better. You see what I mean? You hear the story, but to the vast amount of people, they're like, super AI is super, right? It is all these things that we should fear, and it's going to take our jobs and such. And again, that's such a loss because what I've seen and you've seen as well, when people take on a job, they take on insane amounts of emotional work. That's what I think we don't even have any baseline for. Sorry, you're an engineer. You don't understand emotions. They're those things that you have to carry, anyway. But you see what I mean? Emotional work is probably 80% of the job, right? It's showing up on time. It's managing your schedule in your life in order to be reliable. If you have any responsibilities at all, it's usually, it's the firefighters, right? If we had a perfect world, they'd just sit there and do nothing and we'd be happy, right? That's a perfect job. Would AI take that over? Well, it can't, because during that time they're maintenance and training, and you see what I mean there. If there was something to happen, they would be prepared, and like all of us, they would be a good and bad job, right? It's like they're not perfect. They aren't expected to be perfect. They're expected to have this role. And I find that replacing with AI is like, well, was your role to tell so and so that the emails came in? You see what I mean? Well, computers replaced this a long time ago for you and me, but maybe most of the world never really got to use computers. And that to me is the actual, sorry, that's the actual opportunity. Can you help someone who doesn't use computers teach a computer how they do their job? Meaning an AI, right? Can you give them a context window as to what it is that they do, which is likely quite complicated in almost every situation, right? Just managing a Kanban board or whatever. That took me and a team years to figure out how to do that, right? To effectively use planning was a year. I'm not joking, at least a year of bonding and practice. And that's just like saying, hey, we're going to sub in this new quarterback. We're going to be a great team this year. Never going to happen, right? Because it isn't the job that quarterback does of throwing the football or whatever the hell quarterbacks do, right? It's the coherence of a group toward a goal. And then, of course, assessing the goal, making sure, again, there's just a million problems. It's countless amounts of problems that have nothing to do with getting the work done. So again, I'm very pro-human. I think we completely, like with Kasparov, pardon me, got the wrong message. You know what I mean? Because he still does the extraordinary, which is to understand this game at a level that is obviously laudable, not just because he can win, but just because he's devoted a lot of his time. This is the Hassabis dude's thing, right? He was a chess master as a kid, and then he just decided that AI was more fun or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, but it's still, he ended up with the same, not recognizing that the people part is the hard part. Protein folding was a very hard to get your doctorate in. because the easy ones got found. You know what I mean? Like it scales, right? It gets exponentially harder to prove the kind of things that you get. I'm sorry, I'm getting into protein folding, but you see what I mean? I don't even understand this, but I've asked and researched enough, hopefully, to understand it a little, which is that it's really, really complicated in exponential fashion. And humans are actually weirdly able to handle that. I guess that's, we should give ourselves credit. Like we can become exponentially smarter, you know? And maybe that's not our superpower, but we scale pretty well for in many ways. You know, certainly, again, physically we do, right? Who would imagine how malleable we are physically, even though we all come from the same stock? You know what I mean? Some people look like Arnold, others not, you know, not even close, right? Because we put effort toward it, and over long amounts of time, that effort gets exponentially more useful. I
Yeah.
know. Only a couple of minutes left. Optimism, pessimism. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think there's maybe one more kind of aspect to from the engineering point of view.
Sure.
Maybe one more aspect to the discussion, which is that there's like two types of systems that are kind of like that the AI will have to tackle, right? So there's one set of systems that is kind of deterministic, right? Like
Yep.
maybe kind of like you have an organizational, like an enterprise database, and there's has documents, policies, and all that stuff, right? So it's kind of deterministic, right? And then there's things that you are talking about, right? Like everyday life, perhaps, or perhaps you preparing for a class, right? And you get inspired all the time, maybe with some new information, right? And this is the butterfly effect, right? This is the chaotic system, right?
Yeah.
And I think that humans are kind of natively kind of evolving in that chaotic system where there's always maybe an unexpected pattern
Always.
that we get exposed to, and then we have a way to use that pattern to our advantage or forget about it, right? So
Yeah.
the forgetting aspect, right, is also very important of human brain, right? We are not retaining everything. We are kind of retaining maybe relevance because there was some relevancy, because there was some context, and then the information maybe gets forgotten totally, or maybe it kind of exists maybe in some parts of our brain, right? So I think that you preparing for a course is still a richer process than, let's say, AI kind of maybe preparing the course for you because of that chaotic system kind of like compatibility of a human brain.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, for decades, right, like Carnegie Mellon, Tom Mitchell, the machine learning department chair at Carnegie Mellon, he was always advocating for this continuous learning processes that, how do we define, how do we run a continuous machine learning processes and give the AIs that benefit that we all have, right? Like exposure to constantly occurring new patterns, and how do we take advantage of this? So I think there's some people, in the community, not just like from 5 years ago, but for decades now, recognizing, and agreeing with you that, yeah, this is a valuable process, and maybe it's doable as well in a machine learning setting.
Yeah, and not to, like I said, rather than getting rid of people, my hope was no, do what Keys or any of these people always had, is like, oh no, we should work 3 days a week, right? We should have plenty of time to think about and to do whatever it is. If we're doing work that is complicated, right? Like if we're legislating or something, you can't just keep, you know what I mean? More effort usually does not mean more results in many respects. And to have a human-centered work life is very antithetical to Americans, but it's not so much elsewhere, right? Like you're supposed to have life be as important as work, and nothing falls apart. You know what I mean? Like, in fact, it makes it so it makes them a little nicer. And maybe things are really slow and bureaucracy takes forever. But I started to learn like taking forever is not a bad thing. Sometimes, like you said, you just forget about it. You didn't need it that much to begin with, or you make do in some ways. And that goes back to, I totally agree. We are really good at that. We're outrageously adaptable. That's why we're here. You know what I mean? We managed to survive just about anything. And weirdly enough, kept nature from killing us, which I'm always surprised, right? Like it only wants to kill you, right? It's not there, it's not there to be 70, it's not there to be San Diego. Okay. San Diego, well, I guess if you went into the water, no, even that. San Diego is about the only place that isn't trying to kill you. And you know this, right? You
Yeah,
could
it's
you could
very
probably wear
special.
some shorts and pretty much live, maybe off of things you find on the ground. Maybe. But it doesn't mean that you can marry, have kids, and you know what I mean, and sort of have stability. You would have to constantly be putting effort toward things, which many do. Many manage to survive through constant effort. Um, my hope is that you have some balance. I know for me personally, I just had to do some really complicated work around budgeting and contracts and timelines and deliverables. And with pretty much a paragraph of text, GPT did a wonderful job. But it has a huge context window. I'm not saying I could just go to Google and say, here, give me a contract, which is what most people would do. And then I would sit there and try to piece together something usable. Does that make sense? Like, and that I'm grateful for, because I don't want to learn contract law. I don't want to learn necessarily project management. I want to do the work. And I really don't mind if I didn't hire a project manager or a lawyer, which may be the end of this video since, but is that the professions of the future? I don't know. I'm even wondering if radiology is a profession of the future, since I believe you can pretty much read x-rays really well with AI, right? And I think you can read them instantaneously, which makes it even better that you don't have to wait a week or a month for somebody to look at something. I don't know. And also remember too, poor people, they're extremely skilled, but their context windows can be very small, right? They're not looking at you. They're not looking at, they're looking at one thing and they're trying to get all the info from one thing. And I think that's what I'm trying to teach in this course, is that we're really, the more we focus on those one things, sorry, engineers, it gets brittle really quick, right? Like, that's why I said we are adaptable. You're like, oh, wait, I might need to shift my perspective. Maybe this field of study is not getting me to where I need to go and I'm going to change. But I can keep all that knowledge and apply it toward gaining new knowledge, which is always exciting to me, right? Like, it never seems to be a bad thing to exercise. Boy, can I bring it all together for you, Jack? Right? The muscle memory is always good, no matter what the topic is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the question, the question of human brain plasticity, is probably maybe something for another meeting. But yeah, I guess I guess I'm kind of thinking about the next level AI, right? Like, is it gonna be a good thing to have maybe the Blade Runner level of robots, like Nexus 6, right, in around us, right? I think it's certainly possible, right? Certainly, Elon is betting on this, and a lot of other places are kind of actively researching, humanoid robots. But I don't know. Your examples, like, for example, the firefighter example, that you gave, right? Like, perhaps it's a good thing. The Fukushima disaster, for example. If there was a humanoid robot that can navigate this highly radioactive like a reactor bunker,
Yeah.
in Fukushima before it exploded, and flip some switches, maybe open a valve or two, maybe the whole place wouldn't explode and release all that radioactivity outside if there was like a robotic system there, right? Like with AI, because you wouldn't be able to actually steer the AI through the rubble. It would have to be an edge AI that can look at the damage and kind of navigate its way around it. But then you can make an opposite argument. If only somebody designed that place very easily, with just a simple valve that will open by itself without any AI, just kind of like, hey, have an extra safety kind of valve opening process. Then
If you
perhaps
knew the thing was going to blow up.
exactly, exactly. So you can make that argument, but I think we cannot, right? So therefore, we need perhaps this flexible AI reasoning capability, so that we don't have to be kind of put all the effort, all the kind of like all the eggs in the basket in the design phase, because we know that we will never going to be able to make a perfect design of anything. So then maybe during the usage at
Well,
the
my
end of
point
the
is it's
thing.
literally impossible. That's
Yeah,
what I'm saying. Like the laws of the universe won't let you.
exactly. So that robot may be sitting somewhere waiting for the bad thing to happen, and helping us out to kind of get out of trouble, might be actually maybe the one of the more kind of like useful applications of AI.
Well, except the first 100 times that it encounters it, it'll make it worse. Just like we do. See, this is the thing. It's like it
Yeah,
would just be like
yeah,
us,
yeah.
which are that's the problem. But I think next time we're going to go toe to toe, and finally we need to settle this robot thing. Okay, so these the I love the embodied contextual intelligence concept,
Yeah,
and you can be Catholicism and I will be Protestantism, right? Like this is the eternal debate over
yeah.
sentience, right? Like that. This is the thing. Is like, is this even possible? Or maybe we'll just make up some shit and talk about whatever, as
Well, I
always.
will I will be the R2D2 guy, and you can be the C3PO guy.
Well, I am programmed for translation, and my second language is Butu. So, well, till then, thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
And scene. That was funny. I